And so you've got the vision of the organization and you got the vision of the person, what they want for their lives. And if they can see the overlap in there, then they can achieve, they have the motivation, they can get up, they do the job, they're happy. When that Venn diagram sort of pulls apart and they don't see themselves in the organization and the vision of the organization, that's when things like quiet quitting happen.
So every now and again, we come up with new words to describe something that's evolved or a new process. And one of the words we've got used to hearing is this phrase of quiet quitting, which, we go back 4 or 5 years ago, nobody would have mentioned those two words together, but it's become a very common phrase when talking about employees and employers. Quiet quitting, it's a new concept. Is it a trend? Is it something that's going to be here for a long time? And if it is, we need to understand what it is and what's the impact it does it have on us as employers and business owners, and more importantly, on our employees and their ability to perform as high performing parts of our business. Now, we're delighted today to have Dr. Aaron Bazin with us to explain, what is quiet quitting and how does that what's the impact for us. But just a little bit of his background, originally from Pakistan, been through Europe, but now has been working, I guess, really at the forefront of strategic decision making for over 20 years. And he's overseen the development of 16 or more high-level visionary documents for large global organizations, numerous startups, non-profits, has a passion for crafting forward-thinking visions, which is really helpful for us. And we're looking forward to hearing some of these visions that he's going to share with us, empowering organizations to achieve sustained and positive growth. Now, Dr. Bazin has written over 30 publications from organizational psychology, strategic mindset, vision, been involved with orchestrating the 2010 withdrawal of 100,000 service members from Iraq, spearheading long-range visionary initiatives to NATO, US Army, US Special Operations. So about strategy. He knows about strategy. He's got a great track record. It's been involved in over 400 combat missions. We're absolutely privileged to have Dr. Aaron Bazin with us today. So welcome to the microphone.
Thanks for having me here, Paul. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, look, I think we're equally honoured to have you on the podcast sharing your experience, because there's quite a lot of it there. And when it comes to strategy and performance and achievement, you've certainly been involved in many situations, and you're using that experience to help other people. So, delighted to have you here. Quiet quitting is a new concept. I guess really. Why quiet quitting, and what's the impact? It's obviously quite a major factor that's happening at the moment. It's the subject of your latest book. Why quiet quitting?
Well, really, Paul, when probably what happened with a lot of us and a lot of your listeners too, is after COVID or during COVID, we had a chance to stop and reflect and think and make, it really reevaluate ourselves and what we've done and where we want to go in our lives. And a lot of us realize that, hey, punching a clock 9 to 5, 40 hours plus more a week and working until the day we die is not really what we want to do. So we're like, hey, let's try to find a little more balance, but the old models didn't really apply. So what I started digging into was really my own personal experience. And so I spent time in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, all over the Middle East, all over NATO. And I started reflecting on my experiences and the experiences of my colleagues of like, what did it all really mean? When you add it all up, a lot of people doing a lot of great things, a lot of sacrifices being made of life, of money. What did it really mean? What was our vision that we were working toward? And then did we achieve that? And unfortunately, the answer I got, even working at the highest levels and being paid to work on these problems, was that we didn't have a very good vision. And we didn't have a vision that we communicated to others and that others could buy into. As a point of comparison, you look at after World War II, the Marshall Plan. It basically, in less than 4 years, the whole economy of Europe bought into the vision of a post-war Europe. And the economy was even more than it was before the war started. So it got me on this track of like, what does vision really mean? And what does it mean for a person to work in a job, in any job. And so you've got the vision of the organization and you got the vision of the person, what they want for their lives. And if they can see the overlap in there, then they can achieve, they have the motivation, they can get up, they do the job, they're happy. When that Venn diagram sort of pulls apart and they don't see themselves in the organization and the vision of the organization, that's when things like quiet quitting happen. So that's what really got me on the topic. And so even though my background is in the military, I used basically the Fortune 100 vision statements. So I spent about a year and a half looking into the vision statements of the top country or top companies in the world and what they did. And that's what this book reflects, is like how do they approach vision? How do they paint a vision for their people and all their stakeholders and get people to buy into it? And that's the secret of the book, is this, I think, and the secret to quiet quitting is really having a vision and following that and communicating that and having your people see that in there. But a lot of times it's not about incentives and dollar bills. It's about the human needs. It's about talking to them, seeing what they need, and helping them see themselves in the organization and see how they matter.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because your book is called The Vision Advantage: How to Curb Quiet Quitting, Build Resilience, and Create Growth. I think most people I talk to, when we look at this concept of quiet quitting, we're looking at it, well, it's the employee that is at fault here, and they're the ones with the problem. But from what you've just said, and drilling down a bit further on that, the problem is really with the leadership of the organization. Is that a correct assumption?
Definitely. And so I say in the book that 99% of organizations have it all wrong, have it 180 degrees upside down. What I mean by that is you look at a typical organization diagram, I'm sure you've seen them before. At the top is the leader, then down you've got the mid-level managers, then you've got the employees at the bottom. And so it's a top-down, bottom-up sort of thing. That's not how things in nature work. If you look at it like a tree or a plant, you take this pyramid and invert it. The leaders at the bottom, they provide the vision. That's the DNA, the plant, the kernel, the seed. The real value comes from the top of the tree, the people producing the fruits. So I think really, and this may not be popular for some of your listeners in management positions, right, or a little controversial, but it's probably not a quiet quitting problem. It's probably a leadership problem where you don't know what your people want and you're unable to communicate how your organization is helping them achieve what they want and supporting them. In my mind, I talk about this a little bit in the book. A leader should be like a farmer, like taking care of that plant. They're nurturing the plant. Sometimes they got to prune the branch. That's fine, but they protect it from predators. They give it the nutrients it needs. And if you raise a tree right, like I'm here in Florida, so if you raise an orange tree right, it produces a beautiful tree, a lot of fruit. If you just let it go wild, within 2 seasons, it's completely useless because it's not grown. It doesn't have a caretaker. So that would be my challenge to leaders out there: is really view yourself as a caretaker of the organization you've been entrusted to.
Hmm. Okay, so we've established that the quiet quitting is really a symptom of the real problem, which is our leadership and the lack of vision in many instances.
That's what I believe. And like I said, I'm not to say that I got experience as a quiet quitter, but I may have been a little bit guilty of quiet quitting behavior in the past. And I think a lot of people, it's natural, right, to really stay motivated every day for years in, years out. It's really difficult. What I'm talking about is when it gets negative or when it gets a little bit detrimental for the organization, and they're not performing the way that they should be, not shouldering their load. If I could tell you a real quick story, one time as a young lieutenant, I was at the Army Ranger School. At this school, we carry a huge pack. It's 20 hours a day of training. Some days no sleep at all, up and down mountains, all the worst possible conditions you could imagine. One meal a day, type thing. And I was there in the mountain phase, which was probably the hardest thing I did in my life. And I'm a big guy, so I was carrying the machine gun, I was carrying all the equipment, a big tripod, ammunition, all this stuff. And we, day in, day out, we're walking up and down these mountains. And I finally take my pack off, and my job was like to stack all the rucksacks up all together. And I put all the rucksacks together. Like a couple of my friends' rucksacks were very, very light. They're like feathers. I'm like, guys, I'm like, stop. okay, we got to get something straight. You got to carry your share of the burden. So that's one of the first things that happens with quiet quitting, in my experience, is that you're still there, you still look like you're working, but you're not carrying quite as much of the load as you should be. And that's a sure sign. If a leader recognizes that, that's a sure sign that something's off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's an interesting concept. You talk about, employees not carrying their fair share of the load and others doing more. And I think that builds a resentment if that's allowed to continue.
Oh, definitely, 100%. And then the thing is, if it's not talked about, that's when it gets even worse. So if I hadn't spoken up and let the resentment build, and now it's not even quiet quitting, it's real quitting. Like, hey, I'm out of here, guys. And so I'm not doing this for you. You're not doing anything for me. And so it comes down to communication. One of the things I believe is that communication is motivation. Even if it's an ugly subject that you don't want to talk about, if you talk about it and get your feelings out and talk to your people, then you're able to capture what's going on and can address it. If you leave things unsaid, obviously, a lot of times things won't be dealt with in a good time frame and fester and get worse, like you said.
Hmm. It's interesting. One of our recent guests, Trudy McDonald, was talking on the subject of moving your teams from a stage of burnout to high performing teams and brilliance. And one of the key things that she talked about was we've avoided accountability for our employees. We've gone too much into managing the culture managing the employee back into the office and making sure everybody survives through COVID, that we've withdrawn from enforcing accountability. And you just mentioned, that need to have those awkward or difficult conversations to establish, what is expected of people. So it's interesting that we're seeing the issues coming back to, I guess, really, the leadership and setting those expectations and a method of saying, well, hang on, we're going to hold you accountable, and if you're not performing, then you're letting down the rest of your team as well, and they're going to have to burden up, carry a bigger load because you're not performing.
Definitely. Well, the way I boil it down is a pretty simple. I'm a simplistic guy, and so I boil things down to like a simple formula. In my mind, it's first you have the vision, then you add the leadership, and that gives you the growth. And so if you don't have the vision, but you just try to lead, you're not going to get the growth. If you just have the leadership without the vision and leadership, you got to have both and put them together. And so that's why I really focused on this book. Is like painting that picture for your employees of what you see. And I don't care if you're a general and you've got 50,000, 100,000 people under your command, or you're coaching a little league softball team. It's the same. You have to have a picture in your mind and then communicate that to people to get them to go where you want to go. And that's that's at the fundamental level. That's what I think leadership's all about.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are thinking that they've got to be leaders, but they're ignoring that whole vision aspect of leadership. So you've called it the book The Vision Advantage. What do you mean by that vision advantage? Because it's quite I guess, a new concept for a lot of people hearing it for the first time.
Yeah, definitely. So I did, like I said, I spent about a year doing research into the vision statements of the Fortune 100. And so I identified really the six key things that make their visions different than anyone else. And I boiled it down to an acronym called CREATE. And so the first part, the C, is codifying your higher purpose. So a lot of great organizations have a purpose, but it's a higher purpose to serve society, to serve their stakeholders, to serve something bigger than themselves. So that would be the first part. The second one is really recognizing the norms and values. What sort of behavior do you want out of your people? And then really communicate that to them. And what do you value? Do you value honesty, transparency, whatever your field of endeavor is? There's certain core things that and it's really the value piece that gets people to behave in the way you want them to behave and congruent with what your organization believes. The third part is exploring identity. You have to know who you are and what your purpose is and what value you add. The next part, A, is analyze core tasks. So what are the 3 to 4 things that you do as an organization that you have to do better than anybody else? It doesn't matter what type of organization you are. it's easy to get distracted. And so the what I learned is that you have to focus on what matters most in those core tasks. The T for in create is thinking in time. So you have to be able to conceptualize where you've been, where you're at, and then where you're going. One great story about this is the company Lego, which I'm sure you've heard of. For you, less than 10 years ago, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Now they're one of the most valuable brands in the world. And what they did is they didn't look to the future; they looked to their past, and they looked to their core. Their core mission was to make an experience for kids, and they took that and then really doubled down on this past that they had created and created this nostalgia. And now they're to the moon. They're doing great. And so really thinking in time. And then finally, the last one is establish location. So you add up as create, CREATE. An established location one is a pretty big deal. You may not think about it, but here in real estate, location, location, location. That's what makes a difference. Really, for organizations, where you're physically located can have a tremendous impact, even in this virtual world. Think of a company like IKEA. They're founded, found in Scandinavia, but they're if you looked at where they're positioned, they're in a perfect position of high skilled tradespeople to make the furniture. They were near woods and the raw materials of lumber, and they created this model that now is exported all over the world. But it's all purely based on location. So you take all these factors together, and what my research indicates is that's what really makes a good vision.
Is that something that if I was a small business owner starting this process, would it be something that I would sort of come up on my own, or should I involve my key decision makers, my team in that process?
I definitely think you should involve your team, and the more you can involve them, the better it will be, and the more it will resonate with them. Also, as a startup, it's very difficult to do this because you've got to worry about paying the bills, you've got to worry about marketing, you've got to worry about there's a million different things to factor. But if you sit down and really fence time off to think in your mind, like, what do I want to create? What am I making here? Involve your it could be a parent, it could be a spouse, it could be a friend, and just whoever say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is the vision I want to create, what do you think about it? And be willing to change it. Like, hey, building a store here is great, but there's a store right next to it. Did you think of that? You're like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't do that. A lot of times we decide, hey, let's go off on our own, and the entrepreneur spirit is great, and it's an amazing. Australia, U.S. That's one great thing we deliver for the world is our entrepreneurial spirit. But for every 10 entrepreneurs out there, there's nine that haven't made it yet, and one that's just barely squeaking by. My advice to them, and really that's who I wrote this book for, those that don't have time or the money to bring in high paid consultants to help consult on this. Really, I lay out, hey, this is before you go, before you make big decisions, visualize in your mind what you want and position yourself properly. And then, it's one of those things. A little bit of preparation can save a lot of sweat in the end. So.
Mm. And I think, look, just from listening, if you've got your vision clearly defined, then it affects the actions and the decisions you're going to make. Which will, when you're busy as a startup, you want to be focused and you don't have a lot of resources to waste on activities that you shouldn't be following. So that will give you some clarity. So it would be a great first step. But also, if you've got your team involved in that process of creating that vision, they've got buy-in, and I think tying back in, if they're aligned with your vision and they have some ownership to it, then they're going to be, I guess, this quiet quitting concept is probably not going to apply. Would that be a fair?
In organizational psychology, it's sort of organization person fit, right? So every organization has their own thing going on, their own culture, their own things that they do. An employee coming in, they may be a great person, they just may not be a fit for that organization. If you can paint your vision correctly, when you bring a new employee in, you have a place for them to fit, and then it all works together. It's when they don't fit or when they feel they're disconnected that the quiet quitting happens, and that's when these negative behaviors happen. But like you told me before the call, really this great legislation that I think Australia is doing, where they give people this barrier of like a little space. What is it? What do you call it? The no
Yes.
contact
So
our
the right to disconnect.
right to
So
disconnect.
yeah, so right to disconnect meaning effectively that as an employer you have a right to refuse communications from your employer after hours which are unreasonable. And you're just giving some enforcement, some legal enforcement to your rights as an employee to separate from your work environment.
I think that's wise. Like I said, I mean, ideally, people are engaged and doing things every day, 100% for the organization, but that leads to what you're talking about with burnout. It leads to, if you have a leader that sees himself at the top, it could lead to abuse of the people beneath them. So I think it's a wise. Everything has its limits, right? Anything taken to its extreme can be negative, and in case of work, I mean, you look at the statistics of our work life. When we were younger, our parents, we had a 40-hour work week. Now it's about 60, 80, and it's pushing 90 hours in some developed countries, and they never disconnect. So I think that's very wise. I think Australia's made a good call for sure on this right to disconnect.
Hmm. And I think it'll be interesting to see whether it has an impact on this quiet quitting phenomena, particularly in Australia. But I think we've got some probably more foundational issues in terms of the leadership of organisations, and that's where we need to start. Now, there's a part that we haven't discussed yet, which is talking about the process of creating. Now, you mentioned the acronym, but I think a lot of business owners, and you mentioned also that they're so torn, they're busy doing so many things, paying bills, organising sales, winning new business. Is there a process that to help people work through this structure or the concept of creating a vision for their organization?
Definitely. So what I laid out earlier was like a formulaic approach of how, if some people are very process oriented, and if you want to do step by step, you can do that. What what I would say is, if you don't have time, make some time, right? And it could be an hour a day or an hour a week where you sit down and you write down what your goals are. If you look at some of the great, I give some examples in the book of great people that can envision things well, like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a bodybuilder, of course, also successful politician, also a successful actor. His whole thing, when he was 14 years old, he visualized himself on the stage at Mr. Olympia. At 14, he envisioned himself becoming a world champion bodybuilder. So it's just a matter of picturing yourself. And some people are visual. They could maybe write things. They want to draw a picture. Some people want to write things down. There's no wrong way to go about it. What's most important is that you take time and do it, and then you communicate that to others. You don't just keep that inside as your personal thing, but you, as an organization, to share that with others, and then be humble enough to when your vision that you have in your mind may not be congruent with reality, or what your people are saying, like, "Hey, boss, I know what I think you're saying, but have you thought about this way?" That's when it's time to listen. And then you have a shared team vision, and that gives you the real power as an organization.
Okay. So I guess you mentioned the examples in the book, more detail in the book, obviously, because this is quite a short conversation, and I know you and I could talk for a lot longer about this topic. But you've got a lot of detail, a lot of examples in the book on how to go about curbing this quiet quitting, I guess, symptom of lack of vision. So how do we get a hold of the book? Where's the best place to find it?
So Amazon is the best place right now to get it. It's digital format and print. So Amazon's the best place. Also, I have on my website, visionadvantage.io, is where I have articles, and you can see the book there as well.
Great. So we'll put links to that in the show notes for you to follow, and also on the Business Behind Your Business website. So, but in the meantime, go to Amazon, look for The Vision Advantage, right, by Dr. Aaron Bazin, and also check out visionadvantage.io for some of those extra articles and insights that are well worth taking a look at. So, Dr. Bazin, it's been great talking, and just excited here because I think there's been a lot of negativity around this concept of quiet quitting and a lot of frustration that I'm hearing from small business owners. But I think if we look at that quiet quitting is not the problem, but it's a symptom of the problem. I think it's going to be easier for us to come up with some really good solutions for our businesses.
Definitely, I definitely think so. And like I said, not everyone's a good fit for every organization. So if it doesn't work out, it's not, it's not personal. It's just the way it is. But you need to you need to be able to get the most out of the people that you have, whoever it has. In the Army, and when I was in the Army, I had over 400 people working for me, and I didn't get to pick all of them, but I had them all, right? And so wherever they came from, wherever walk of life, I had to meet them where they're at. And so, like one tip I would offer is that when you have a large organization, or when you have people like that, one thing I did was I spent every day I got to know someone. So I had over 400 people. I spent time out in that day to go meet that person where they were at, figure out what they wanted out of their life, and figure out how I could make that happen for them. So that seems like a drop in the bucket, but after a year and a half, 2 years, I've seen everybody. I know everybody, and it's a way to take a small, take it one person at a time, one relationship at a time, and really, as a leader, it's the people that matter. What you're doing is an outgrowth of the people, and how well you know them, and how well you can find that overlap between yourself and your vision and their personal vision for what they want in their lives.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and you've shared some wonderful tips for us, and really helped, I think, uncover what quiet quitting is about, but also the fact that there is a solution, and it starts with us as the business owner, and we can do something about it. We have control of this process. Got control over the decisions we make, and then we've got control over the outcomes. So it's much better situation when you know it's a situation that you can control, rather than having something beyond your control, because that creates a lot more stress. But I guess we need to take responsibility, be accountable, and create and share the vision with our teams.
Definitely. It couldn't hurt. If you're going to get anywhere, you have to know where you're going. So just bringing people along that journey with you is a first step. There's a lot of other steps around the way, but it's the foundation of everything, in my experience, in my opinion.
Great, fantastic. So thank you, Dr. Aaron Bazin. Check out visionadvantage.io for more information, and please grab yourself a copy of the book, The Vision Advantage, from Amazon, and it'll be one of the best things you do this year. So thank you very much, and thank you again, Dr. Bazin.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Cheers.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit, and send in your burning questions, because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes, or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes, along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.